this transmission is coming to you from just outside the Vulcan Science Academy. Fellow logicians, I am the Lazy Vulcan, and I urge you to do what is logical. Quit your day job, return to living on the couch in your parents' basement, and do what Trekkies are supposed to be doing. Watch Star Trek.
Captain, we're being hailed.
This is the Lazy Vulcan. I've made it to my third episode. I want to thank everyone who's been with me for the first two. Also, a big shout out to our new sponsor, Astronauts Anonymous, helping astronauts reclaim their lives from the effects of low-gravity addiction. Okay, I want to talk about a rumor that has surfaced, and it doesn't fully matter for the conversation whether the rumor is true or not, but it's that Quentin Tarantino would take over the Star Trek movie franchise. At least for one movie anyways. Now, the movie franchise is separate from the TV show. J.J. Abrams did the last three in the Kelvin reboot. And I like that they did the Kelvin reboot because it frees the television show and the movies so they can both do their own thing. And I think that's good. Rather than fighting over mechanical differences or trying to get the two in sync, I think it's nice that they can do a separate thing. But there are some things that Star Trek is and some things that Star Trek is not. I don't want to say this in the gatekeeper sense. That's a word that a lot of Trekkies will use for people who are telling them how to enjoy Trek. The way I want to say it is there are reasons why Star Trek is successful. And that's because it isn't the same thing that we see in every other movie franchise. Now, when J.J. Abrams took over the Star Trek movies, he did add more action sequences. He did add more of those elements that right now in Hollywood are important and that people do enjoy. You see it with the Marvel movies. You see it with Star Wars, of course. That's always been the case. And I'm not saying that's all bad. I think that's important because there's definitely a difference in filming a weekly TV show and in filming a movie that's going to last 2 to 3 hours. There's different things that hold your attention. There are different things that you can do. The budget's different, special effects, etc., etc., etc. And I'm not overlooking that. But Star Trek and Quentin Tarantino have a very different vision, at least as the movies that Quentin Tarantino's done in the past. Now, if he is going to come forward and attempt to do a movie that meets the standards that Trek has set, that reflects the values that Star Trek identifies with, that we hold dear, I might be willing to give that a chance. But if this is going to be women in catsuits waving swords at each other, if this is going to be high violence, killing, and so forth, that simply isn't what Star Trek is. At least in my mind. To me, while we don't have to define Star Trek, I think we can generally say that Star Trek is a utopian idea. Star Trek is the best that humanity, humanoids, people coming together can achieve. It isn't war. That's not the best that we can achieve. It isn't blood. It isn't gore. It's unity. Star Trek had a whole movie where there was no actual foe. The whole movie was about saving whales and reconnecting them with a life form they were communicating with billions and billions of light years away. It did so without violence. It did so with humor. I'm not saying that's the modern movie, but it was a good movie at its time, and it did something different than any other movie franchise had. This is Star Trek. This is what I want to see. Now, there should be space battles. We like seeing ships in combat. Some laser fire, absolutely. Some Klingons with their bat'leth, no doubt. I'd love to see a movie that highlights some of the battles between the Romulans. I always like the Romulans and the Federation. Sure, that's all great stuff. But this is not Quentin Tarantino. Sure, he might do some fight sequences or some unique cinematography, but his movies are dark. They focus on violence. Rather than us knowing the role of women in Quentin Tarantino movies, it leaves us to debate. It makes it unclear. Is this some sort of empowerment, Or is this just some sort of male fantasy of women fighting against each other? I don't think that Star Trek really should be dabbling in these gray areas. I think Star Trek, for us, has always been a solid beacon. Now, there are movies for this. Obviously, Quentin Tarantino's movies. To a lesser regard, there's Star Wars if you want to see battles and kind of a dystopian kind of thing. But Star Trek is something different. Star Trek is a new universe. It's not used. It's not dirty. There's elements of it, Section 31, which I think have been overused, and we can get into that later. But what I want to do for this podcast, I'm going to keep it really short because I'm kind of rambling and ranting. But I want you to think, what do you want Star Trek to be? And when you do that, not as a TV show, not as Discovery, but what do you want the movies to be? So they've done 3 movies in the Kelvin universe. They featured the original series kind of re-envisioned. I think that was great. There's elements I liked of it. There's elements I didn't like of it as much. But by and large, I did like it. So going forward, what do you want to see? Now we know that, is it Chris Pine his name? Might not come back as Kirk. So maybe they move on to the next generation. Maybe they do something else. Hey, maybe they get a movie with Pike. That'd be interesting. Before he's, I guess in the Kelvin universe, he's just in a wheelchair. But there's so many things they could do that I think are different than what everyone else has already done. And to me, that is why I don't want to see Quentin Tarantino. I don't want to see the same thing. I don't want to have to question, is this misogynist? Is this empowering women? Is this too violent? I want something that's Star Trek, which when I look at it, I know is a positive vision for the future. As always, I'd like to hear your comments. Get on my Twitter, Real Lazy Vulcan. I'll put a poll up. And until next time, live long and prosper.